What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be going over my personal pros and cons of 10th edition, how it looks from the outside, and if it's going to be a game now that we've seen a lot more of it and it's been out for a little while, will I be jumping into it? So a few months ago I did a video about will 10th edition save Warhammer 40k, and in that video I spoke about, as someone who dropped out around sort of 6th, 7th edition, started in 4th edition, it was my main game, how it felt trying to get back into the game after sort of losing that sort of focus and love for it a little bit during the sort of 8th and 9th edition periods, where the game had evolved into something that just really wasn't appealing for me to bother really jumping back in, and I was having so much fun with Age of Sigmar, and still do, that 40k just really was off the radar for me. And that was when we were seeing some of the previews and 10th edition was on the verge of being released, but obviously now it's been out for a bit, people have played lots of games and things like that. I would just like to say before we get too much into this video that this is just going to be a sort of talking rambly video, so if you are hobbying along, carry on with that. There's nothing really on the screen bar a few bullet points which I'll be talking through anyway, so there's nothing really to watch, so to speak, so carry on doing what you're doing if you wish to have this play along in the background there. But yeah, this kind of video is going to be a look back at 10th edition as it is now from the outside, from a perspective of someone who hasn't really played any games or anything. I've watched some bits on YouTube, I've read a lot of the articles, I've read the indexes, I've read the rulebook, so it's like I know how things work, and obviously playing a lot of 40k back in the day, I can compare how the rules are now to how it used to be, but I haven't got any hands-on experience, I haven't played any games of 10th, so to speak. So unlike when I do Age of Sigmar videos, as someone who's played lots of Age of Sigmar and all up to date with all the current things and how it all works, smooth as anything, then I can give a lot more of a varied opinion. So this is going to be coming from someone who's looking more from the outside in, and seeing sort of how intimidating 10th edition actually is, coming back into it from someone who's been playing from way back in the days of like a 4th edition. In the comments of that video, someone did say they would love to see my opinions less about the rules side of the thing and what would stop me getting back into 40k if the rules weren't an issue. And I'm going to cover both in this video. What we're going to do is we're going to do the pros and cons, and I'm going to break that down even further into two sections. So I have a hobby side and a rule side. We're going to go through the hobby side first, and we're going to talk about the pros, and then we're going to talk about some cons. And I'd love to hear your opinion on the game in general, as well as what you think about my reflection upon the game and some of the things that I'll be talking about. I have just launched a Lakey Wargames Discord, and there are lots of 40k rooms in there, as well as just generic hobby rooms. So link in the description below if you wish to discuss that further in sort of Discord, but if not, just leave your comments in the comments down below of your thoughts on this matter. So, with that all out of the way, let's jump on into the hobby side of things and talk about some pros. The first thing, and the one thing that we can't escape talking about, is the fantastic looking miniatures range that is Warhammer 40k. As much as I love the nostalgic feel that I get when I see some of these older sort of 3rd, 4th, 5th edition models, there's no debate now that obviously with all the technology and all the advancements and the sculpting tools that Games Workshop have at their disposal, miniatures now are way better than they were back then, and 10th edition models look absolutely fantastic. Playing Age of Sigmar a lot myself, like I know how fluid and awesome the Age of Sigmar game looks, purely because of all the amazing models that they've got, and it's awesome to see that ported over to 40k, and it's almost day and night with how great that they look these days. So big thumbs up. The modelling side of 40k is absolutely spot on. A second point of pros that I'd like to add is it's great to see the lore advancing and units actually benefiting from that, from a hobby standpoint and kind of from a rules standpoint as well, I suppose. As heartbreaking as I'm sure it is, say if you're an Imperial Guard player and Cadia was your bread and butter, seeing that all go up in flames must have been absolutely horrendous, but at the same time, in a grander picture and someone from the outside seeing that kind of thing happen in the story and the lore, and then you're getting new characters that come out from that, so not only is the model line itself advancing, so from a hobby perspective you get to paint up these new units and these new heroes that have emerged from the story, but it also reflects into your tabletop experience as well, being able to take those units and use them in your games. Advancing the story as well gives you more as more regiments or more races pop up, then it's just an ever expanding thing that you actually get to play some more ideas on and just add to the back pocket of the vast lore that is Warhammer 40k, and just keep on trucking with all of your hobby ideas as you're going. So it's great to see that from a lore perspective, that the timeline is going forward and you can just get basically unlimited, endless possibilities from your hobby from taking some ideas from the advancing lore. Next up, and the last pro that I have today for the sort of hobby non-rule side of things, is Games Workshop seem to spread the love around a little bit more for the factions than they used to, or at least it seems that for me. Like seeing the 40k articles and that come up, it seems like Games Workshop does a great job of being able to actually benefit a lot of the different factions, whether it's the Xenos factions, whether it's the Marines, that kind of thing. I know Space Marines get a bad rap for obviously getting everything. They are the kind of poster child, and that's just how it is. They are a very popular faction. But back in the day, it used to be that, you know, there were certain factions that got absolutely no love at all. But it seems to be a lot less of a problem these days. I'm sure people that play certain armies will tell you otherwise, because they probably do get a little bit less of the limelight. And unless you collect that army, you wouldn't really notice it. But it does seem, for me, at least from an outside perspective, looking back in at the game, that there is a more generic, more involved feel of all the factions, and that's just great for all intensive hobby purposes. Lots more kits for lots more factions, whether you want to convert something up that your models have been sort of destroying or slaying that thing, or again just theming it against another faction. That is only beneficial for your hobby. So we've looked at some of the pros for the hobby side of what I think about has come from the thing of 10th edition. So let's look at some of the cons. And that is, although they are amazing to look at, there's no doubt that the models are fantastic. It can be a little bit stale without converting things. And that isn't a generic problem for every single faction, but quite a lot of the things like Primaris Marines or the Imperial Guard regiments still seem to be a problem all these years later. Guard in particular, like all the Cadia models are absolutely fantastic. If that's your sort of jam, your bread and butter, so to speak, then that's fantastic. Like, you've got unlimited potential and some amazing kits to in any sort of variety of Cadian theme that you wish to see. But it's really sad to see that there isn't something else. Like the Catachan Jungle Fighters are still the really, really old kit from back when I used to play. But all the others have disappeared. So like your Vosterian Firstborn have gone. The Death Corp, it's like an odd thing because the Kill Team kit came out. So if you wanted to spend like £1 million and buy that box over and over again, you could maybe make a Death Corps army. And Forge World has been pulling some of their kits because that was like an exclusive Forge World only army, but Forge World seems to have this weird relationship where everything is slowly dying from there. I don't quite know what's going on. But yeah, even with like the Primaris Marines, it's great that all these Space Marine factions have access to these amazing new looking Primaris, but the kits themselves all look really the same. It's that kind of problem of you've painted this Space Marine blue and you've painted this one yellow, when really it's like the difference between those two chapters historically and sort of just how they function is so day and night that it should reflect that in the minis and kind of how they go about their ways of life and warfare, and it's not really represented in these new kits. So it's great obviously from a generic standpoint, but without converting them and without any sort of upgrade kits or anything, it's really hard to be able to tell that story of your regiment without everything kind of looking the same. And that's not a problem, like I said, for everything. Like Orc kits are obviously just Orc kits, whether you want to do different clans and things. Again, same sort of thing, you can convert bits, but for a lot of the newer, more generic factions, there does seem to be this lack of identity that some of the older models really, really had. And they don't really seem to release the upgrade kits like they used to, so it's not a case of just buying that box of Primaris Marines, then buying your specific sort of chapter upgrade and being able to customize them that way. So it makes it a little bit more difficult unless you're going to go down the sort of 3D printing route and self-converting. But straight out of the box, Games Workshop seems to have a lot less options for making those specific armies. Another con that I want to talk about is the hobby side, and this is something that really jumped out at me with the latest release. with the especially with the new assault marines. But why is everything jumping off a rock, and why do they all have to have scenic bases? This is more just a personal gripe of mine. I know from a single miniature standpoint it looks fantastic. You've got a hero in that heroic pose standing on top of a rock, sort of bellowing out orders or something like that, but it seems to be a really big theme in 40k these days. You've got the new assault marines that are all 5 of them jumping off rocks, and it just looks like they're going to fall over. You've got the jump pack captain who's on some like horrendously thin little pillar at the top of it, and I get it's to give the models height and make it look like the assault marines and the jump packs are actually doing some flying, gaining some momentum, being on a bit of a higher ground, but it's across so many of the armies now. Like the Hormagaunts kit's got it, the lictors, all the new lictors from the Tyranids have got like built-in bases to them, and they look fantastic, but when you get multiples of them and they're built into these bases, it makes it a little bit difficult to be able to sort of repose them again without completely converting up the miniatures. Like the assault marines, you couldn't have them just stood on their legs like on the ground unless you were going to sort of cut them at the knees, repose them and green stuff, which isn't a very beginner friendly thing to have. Again, that might not bother everyone at all, but for me it's like I like a bit of variety. They're very cool to have sort of maybe every other miniature's doing something a little bit different, having that sort of heroic pose, jumping off of something, but like to have it on nearly every miniature is just almost a little bit overkill, I think, at this point. A lot of the Eldar units, a lot of the Imperial Guard units, it's just something, the more you look into the range, the more you see it, and once you've seen it, it can't be unseen. So I apologise if I've ruined that for you. But yeah, it would just be nice to have less of these bases, or if the kits were more sort of optional friendly to include or not include the base or that little bit of rock, and it's sort of like, it would be nice if it's an optional additional thing that you can put on, but not have to be specifically built in and then converted out to not have it more often than not. Now, the last con that I have today is quite a big one, and this for me would be a completely separate video on its own topic, like I spoke about slightly last time, but the scale creep / Primaris problem for Marines coming or not coming for certain armies make it really hard to jump in and start collecting and just get into said faction. So when I looked at getting back into 40k, I thought about going back into Space Marines because that's where I started all them years ago, and they're just big, cool, they've got access to a lot of different things, so it makes it sort of variety is the spice of life, so to speak. And yeah, you can kind of just, the sky's the limit with Marines, and converting just goes hand in hand. But 2 of the factions that I really like the most are Space Wolves, specifically going into sort of Thunderwolf heavy, and also Grey Knights. Now the problem I always think is, obviously there's a lot of things with the Primaris Marines. Some of the kits have had this dealt with nicely, like the new Scouts obviously aren't like Primaris, so to speak, but they did get a nice new kit and it's just done. But there's certain things that just, there's big question marks over them, and we don't know what they're going to do with them. You don't know how long or how far that's going to be. So for example, like I said, the Thunderwolf heavy army is something I would love to do. I'd love to have like Canis Wolfborn, all the sort of Wolf Lords on their Thunderwolves, and then just try and do a really Thunderwolf heavy army. But it's quite a challenge to think, am I going to go out and spend sort of, you know, anywhere between £500 to like £1,000 on all these different Thunderwolves, and then it could be 6 months to a year later a new Thunderwolf kit comes out, they get Primaris or something, now you've got Primaris Thunderwolves, and then you can have that problem like with Firstborn, where the Firstborn are still playable but not as good, and then you know in another year from now they might just push them out the door completely. Or even if they don't go down the Primaris route, it's like, are they going to get the scale creep treatment where they're going to come out with a new kit, they look way better than all the other ones that you've just spent all that money and time hobbying on, and then it makes you feel rubbish because you've literally just finished doing that over the course of 6 months to a year, or however long it would take you to paint that army, and now there's a new shiny thing coming out. And I know you can't kind of live that way because any kit can be replaced at any time, but with the Primaris Marine problem, it's just one of those, it's like Games Workshop never fully addressed it. Like, it's cool to have the Sing of the Law, have new Marines, bigger ones, etc., bring all this new armory with them, but it would have just been nice to have this sort of clear, precise thing of like, these are kits that are probably going to get replaced and these are ones that aren't, etc. like I said, it's a whole debate topic on its own. It's a big mess. It was worse back then than it is now, but it's still a bit of a problem. Like for Grey Knights, for example, I really love Grey Knights. They look really small though, now next to like the Primaris stuff. And we had Castle and Crow come out, and he is a much bigger, beefier guy. Nothing to do with Primaris at all, but like, you would expect that when they come to redo the Grey Knights, which don't really need redoing, like they are fantastic kits, they're just out of scale now to some of the older Marines, some of the newer Marines even, sorry. And like I said, Crow is one of those models where it's just like, that is an example of how they could redo the Strike Squad kit, bring them into line, make them a little bit bigger, a little bit beefier, a little bit more dynamic, and just make them sort of fit the modern times a bit more. And again, it's that same thing of, I don't want to jump in, buy 2,000 points of Grey Knights, spend like 6 months to a year working on them, and then find out they all get replaced, and it's the same kind of thing where you just like, back to kind of square one. Not that you couldn't use the new ones, and it's just like, it's completely a like aesthetic look, so to speak, but yeah, it would just be sort of a bit heart crushing to buy in and then have that change for you. So two of the factions that I really wanted to get into, and it's just like, there's that dilemma overhead, and there's no certainty of if it will ever be done, or when it will be done, or you just don't know. So that's a little bit off-putting, so that is a bit of a con of the hobby side for me. So now that we spoke about the hobby side a bit more, let's dive into some of the rules, and we're going to go back to the pros and talk about some more good stuff that 10th edition has done for 40k in my opinion. The first one is the new data cards. They are nice, clean and awesome, and it's great to have all the unit rules in one place. This is something I'm very familiar with due to my Age of Sigmar ties and roots, having the War Scroll cards for Age of Sigmar, and now it looks very familiar to the 40k ones where you have the unit stats, you have their special rules and sort of their weapons in one place, and I think that is a really cool and nice change. It makes playing games a lot easier. You need to look up stuff for that unit and it's just all there and it's easy to see. And if you're playing against someone and they have their data cards, for example, and you just ask about a unit, like, it's easy just to be like, yep, here you go, just have a quick look, and it's all in one clear, concise. You don't need 20 different books with rules in each different one. Whether they'll stick to that or not, because I know that they are a little bit terrible for things like that, like once the codexes start coming out and the campaign expansions, and it will no doubt scatter across the winds to all the different books. But currently 10th edition it's got nice, clean and awesome concise rules all on the data cards, and I really like that. The next pro that I have here is they kept the universal special rules, and that's something that I know some people don't like. They find it a bit sort of flavourless, so to speak, but I think it's really good for the game in that sense, because what you can do is you can give units their own special abilities that make them unique to them. So for example, like Primaris Marines can do their own sort of loyalist, upholding honour kind of thing, whatever they want to do, and like you could have a Chaos Marine who is sort of despoiling and ravaging and sort of destroying things, and they can do that in their own sort of data cards entry of themselves. But for example, when they're both firing their plasma weapons and plasma has X rule and does whatever, having that in the main rule book where it's just like, yep, my plasma gun also has this, or if it's got something that's a different name, I know Marines to Marines is a bit copy and paste, but you know, for example, like an Imperial Guard plasma gun and a Space Marine plasma gun, maybe they've got slightly different stats because, you know, one's a bit bigger or whatever, but they still share the same thing, like getting hot or hazardous, I think it's called now. It's nice to just be like, this is my gun, this is its range, damage, AP, etc. But then you're like, it has XX rule built onto it, and it's like you both already know what that is, because everybody, it's difficult to know every single codex or every single index off the top of your head, every single rule for every single army, unless, you know, you live and breathe it and like tournaments are your thing, and top tabling you have to kind of know that stuff. But like if you're just a casual gamer, knowing the basic rules and sort of everyone sharing these extra universal rules, it just keeps it nice and simple, where you can be like, yep, my big alien gun does this, and the special rules that it has are X and Y, and you both know what X and Y is already, so the only thing that's different is the strength and the AP, which again is tied to the sort of core mechanics of the game, so you know how it works. So when you're fighting something for the first time, it's not as hard to get your head around what it does, and I think universal rules are great for that. One of the other pros, and we spoke about this a little bit in the other video, but heroes joining units is awesome to have back. I can't get that across enough. seeing that change in the 9th edition, where like heroes had to sort of stand behind units and they could claim the lookouts there or not get shot or something. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But they would give buffs to like nearby units. It just kind of seemed a bit off, like coming back from sort of 4th, 5th edition where you could just bolt heroes into units, and they would just be there. It was just weird to not see that in the game anymore, but it's great to have it back, and I think that's a lot of fun. It's thematic, seeing heroes lead units, and yeah, it's just awesome to have, and I really like that change. Objective control. What a mechanic this is. I really like this one. Having units having the ability to be worth X amount on an objective is really cool and really thematic, and it gives purpose to units that sort of may not be your optimal or your first choice pick, let's say. So having like a tactical marine, for example, who might have objective 2, 3. Again, I don't know the rules completely off my head, but like for example, just having your basic troops choices having a higher objective capture weight than like a tank or something like that just makes sense, and it really is a nice way to sort of balance out the game and have you have a reason to take those smaller troops choices rather than just spamming out all of the big sort of killer, scary sort of demolition units that you might want to take just purely for damage, because it's like, well, even if only a couple of those guys survive, they are the guys for objectives, so they will outnumber like 10 of your guys, even if only a handful of them live. And it's something that I like to see more in Age of Sigmar 4.0. As someone who plays AOS a lot, I would love it if we sort of stole this rule from 40k. We do have a thing where like monsters and stuff are worth more on objectives, like the higher your wounds count, the bigger your model is, the more it's worth on an objective. But I think having an outright objective control stat for units would be absolutely awesome. The last pro that I have for the rules today is I love how easy it is to build armies. When I first looked into it looked at getting back into it for 9th edition, it just seemed a really big mess, kind of with all the force organizations, doing different things for like command points and things. It was very overwhelming, even from someone who used to play back in the day. Like, I'm used to the force organization chart, but yeah, just having all these different like battalion rules and things bolted on, it just seemed absolutely crazy to have. And I like the fact that it's back to just pick your points of games, here's your unit caps, here's how many points things are worth. I'm a bit on the fence about the unit building choice, so same thing that I have in Age of Sigmar. So you take tactical marines, you take 5 at X amount of points, and then you have to double it up to 10 for like the next amount of points. I don't know if I quite like that for 40k, or if I like the old style where it's, you know, you pay points per guy, and you can, if you want to take 6 or you want to take 8 or you want to take 10, like, you can choose how many you want to put into a unit. But it's not the worst thing to have in the world. But I do love how easy it is to just build the army outright, using that instead of having sort of a billion different force orgs from a billion different places and trying to make these crazy CP farms for optimal usage and all that kind of stuff. And I like the fact that it's just nice and simple to build the armies now, so then you can focus more on the actual in-game tactics instead of having to play across sort of 50 different books to just build your army in the first place. So they were my pros for the sort of rule side of the 10th edition. Now I want to talk about some of the cons for the rules that I've seen just reading over the books. Again, I haven't played any games of 10th edition, so this is just from an outside perspective, playing the old rule sets and just seeing how things have changed. And I said in my pro section that I really like the fact that having all the sort of data cards and all the rules on the data cards is great. But maybe there isn't a need to have so many abilities for every unit. One thing I did find reading over the indexes is like every hero has sort of 2-3 special rules, every unit has 1 or 2 special rules, and then obviously you've got your faction benefits to start with, so it's like by the time you actually start trying to combo your stuff together, it's kind of like you have to pull 6-7 abilities out of 2 different units to then do the thing, and it's just might be a little bit too much. Like, not everything has to do a special thing. You can just have units like a little bit simpler, you know, like Gretchen don't have to do anything like amazing, they can just be Gretchen. Obviously it's just an example, like case in point, it is great to have these sort of flavorable things for all the units, but maybe there isn't a need to have so many abilities for every single unit in the game. Another con that I think is Index giving free upgrades for everything, and sort of the question mark over is that going to remain going forward. I think it's great for sort of rules building, and obviously if you've already got your army, then it's fun because you can just pick and mix and match kind of things as you want. But as someone who wants to buy in and get into 10th edition, it's a little bit kind of, is this going to be the case when the codexes drop? How do I know how to build my units right now without sort of magnetizing every single arm option on? For example, if you look at something like Chaos Chosen, they just have accursed weapons, which can be, you know, anything from the sort of power axe to the sword to your lightning claws. And I know that back in the day they used to all have sort of separate rules, which is nice that they've made it sort of a bit more simpler. And it'll be nice if things like certain things get grouped, like for like all the power weapons to be in sort of one thing, like power weapons do X and like power fists do another. But yeah, not having any points or any of it, and just sort of them going, yep, you just take whatever you want, like you can have this many of this many item and you can just mix and match them how you want, is great. And I'm sure it's a lot of fun again for people who already have all their models and have all those options at their disposal. But it's like, if I was to go out right now and buy a box of Chaos Chosen and just give them all the cool weapons that I really want, then say the Chaos Codex came out, whenever that's going to come out down the road, and the indexes are gone, then all of a sudden that Chaos Chosen unit is like 400 points for 5 guys because I've given them every single upgrade I can and the most expensive choices, because in the index that was what you could just do and it's what you wanted and it's what looked cool on the model, so that's what I just stuck it with. And then yeah, it would just be a little bit annoying to make them sort of redundant a little bit further down the line when the codexes come out. But it would just be nice to have some sort of clarification on that, and just, is that going to be the case when the codexes come out? Maybe I've missed that, maybe Games Workshop have already said somewhere, but it's nothing that I've found or seen. But yeah, it's just like, how do you plan that, future plan that, because you know the indexes aren't forever, and it's just, if codex is going to be like that, then so be it. But yeah, it just is what it is. One of the cons that I found, and I said that this was also in my pros thing, was heroes joining units. But one of the cons that I think is heroes being limited to the units that they can join. And it's kind of one of those middle ground topics for me. It's like, I get it from a balance standpoint. Certain heroes give out certain buffs that would be too strong if it was attached to a different unit. But it would just be nice to be able to just put any of the heroes in any of the units and maybe not give them some ridiculously OP rule that would just be busted. Certain things, obviously, like say like jump pack heroes or Terminator heroes, joining only sort of Terminator units or jump pack units makes sense. But for example, something on foot like just a librarian in power armor, I don't see why he can't be in different other power armored units or other just foot troops. So yeah, like, I get it for balance, but for fun and sort of theme, it seems a bit annoying to not be able to put certain heroes in certain units. And the last con that I have for today is, I wish that there would be like an armory section for building units and points with upgrades. So this kind of bolts on to what I was talking about earlier about having free upgrades for everything is cool for the sort of meantime. It's like, but is it going to be forever? And I think it would just be nice that if we change that to the old school 4th edition, I remember it very well, like your Space Marine Codex used to be, you'd have the points for all the units, and then it was like, in that unit profile it would tell you, a bit like how the indexes do now, it'd be like, you have 10 tactical marines, one can be a sergeant, the sergeant can take X, Y, Z, or from this section of the armory he can have like the sergeant upgrades. So then there'd be a little points section like armory, and you would pay points for things like that. So I wish that we'd have something like that. And again, it might be something that's coming with the codexes, but it's just hard to future-proof and plan for currently, because that's just not how it works in the indexes. But the indexes are only temporary, but we don't know if that's going to stick. So yeah, that would be nice to see. But those are just some of my pros and cons for 10th edition, my thoughts going in. I think I'm going to wait a little bit longer before I dive in. Like, the game looks fun and all that, but I think I might start off with just something like a little kill team early next year. Wait for a few of the codexes to drop. I know that Space Marines is like right at our front door. It's about to come out, so maybe we'll see, and that might answer some of the problems. For example, like if we're going to get an armory section, how upgrades are going to work, things like that. but it's just difficult. And then that still takes me back to some of the things like taking certain units, like buying into Grey Knights. I don't want to buy into them because I know they're going to get scale creeped at some point, so it just makes it a little bit more difficult at that point. So maybe I'll dip my toes in with Kill Team, then maybe a Combat Patrol, and by that point, by the time I've fully built, painted, that kind of thing, because I'm not the fastest hobbyist in the world, then we will see where we're at once there's a few codexes out, and it will give us a bit more scope and shape of how 10th edition is actually going to unfold in a sort of full version of itself when we're a little bit out of the indexes. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. How have you been enjoying 10th edition if you're playing it, or are you sort of still on the fringe, like returning like I am, or are you completely new to the hobby and looking to buy from the outside in? Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts, or join the Discord and let me know in there. It would be great to see some more friendly faces in there, talking shop and also sharing awesome hobby goodness. But that's enough from me today, guys. As always, stay safe. Happy wargaming. Psst. Hey you! Did you know that Lakey Wargames now has an official eBay store? You can buy yourself all kinds of pre-painted and new on sprue hobby goodness and support the channel at the same time. There's a link in the description below if you want to check it out. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Okay, see you in the next one.